Thank you for coming up to code, our permit streamlining and funding workshop for ZEV or zero emission vehicle infrastructure. For those of you not familiar with ZEVs, you're going to be hearing that word a lot today. So today we're going to cover a whole range of topics. We're going to talk about why this is really important: electric vehicle charging stations, EVCS, hydrogen vehicle fueling stations, as well as Assembly Bill 1236 that was passed in 2015 and streamlining EVCS permitting. Hydrogen station permitting, the basics there, accessibility regulations, because we've had some feedback on some confusion there, and the requirements therein of, when do you need to have a van accessible space and when you need to start having handicap accessible spaces for electric vehicle charging stations, as well as incentive funding from different entities such as the Energy Commission for zero emission vehicle infrastructure. First and foremost, why? Why is this important? Well, California has set some pretty aggressive GHG reduction goals for the 2020s, 2030s, and 2040s. We hit our 2020 goal early. As you can see here, we hit it by 2018, but our 2030 goal is going to take a lot more work. And looking at a 45% reduction in emissions over the next decade. And that is just the start of our goals. We're aiming to be carbon neutral as a state by 2045, a zero emission grid by 2045. Our own office has a goal that was given to us by Governor Brown of 1.5 million ZEVs on the road by 2025, 5 million ZEVs by 2030, and the corresponding infrastructure for the 2030 goal in by 2025 to try to speed the rate of adoption. Gavin Newsom, our current boss and current governor, has reaffirmed this sort of climate vision as recently as September with his own executive order, so this is not really going anywhere anytime soon. GHG reduction story so far has mostly been driven by little more than the cleaning up of the grid. We've had a really good job of reducing the greenhouse gas emissions by electrifying our grid, by making it carbon free where we can. We project to continue doing that in the near future. But transportation has been a much tougher nut to crack. We've actually seen an increase in transportation emissions over the last couple of years, despite reducing our overall greenhouse gas emission footprint as a state. We need to make serious progress in the next decade on reducing our transportation emissions if we want to meet our goals and avert what looks to be a global climate crisis. ZEVs are obviously just part of this solution, but the simple fact of the matter is that we need to make them part of the solution faster. We need to speed the rate of adoption, and what we've noticed when we talk to people is that the primary barriers to adoption of ZEVs, both battery electric vehicles as well as hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, is a lack of infrastructure. A 2018 Volvo study told us that low charging station availability was the #2 concern about EVs. The #1 concern was running out of electricity or energy somewhere, which kind of also is a lack of infrastructure problem. Part of this is the fact that, and part of the reason we haven't been able to put as much EV infrastructure in the ground as we'd like, is that California has some of the highest EV charging station costs in the country, mostly related to permitting and redesign costs through multiple repeated rounds of feedback given by building departments and sort of unclear codes on what is and is not. And AB 1236 was passed in 2015 to try to streamline this permitting, but we've seen some really spotty, in our own office, some really spotty implementation of these practices. We currently have about 16% of the state as streamlined, which is, for a bill that was passed 5 years ago, is simply not particularly impressive. And the same thing we see in hydrogen fuel cells. We see that the biggest concern is, where can I fill up? And there's only 44 stations open today with the goal of 200 by 2025. So we clearly need to speed up the rate of adoption there. And we've had a lot of sort of feedback, and we've noticed that as with a lot of novel technologies, it can be unfamiliar. And so there's a lot of questions about what is and is not required when permitting hydrogen stations. So the whole goal of today is to help speed up the amount of steel we can get in the ground on these things, so we can speed up the rate of EV adoption as in the state. To go over some of the really obvious basics, I'm sure a lot of these pictures will be familiar to you guys. What are electric vehicle charging stations? You have your level ones, your classic, plug-in volts from 2011, 2012. They give you a handful of miles per hour plug-in. They plug into your regular 60-volt outlet. Level 2, you see these a lot more these days. You see them you can get them installed in your house. You can see them in your local Walmart, Target, Safeway, wherever things are sold, and you might spend an hour or two. They give you between 12 and 70 miles per hour. And then, of course, we have the level 3 DC fast chargers, which give you, dozens of miles in a matter of minutes. And what we've noticed, and the important thing is that as batteries get larger and larger, these the level 2 and level 3 chargers become increasingly important to fill these things up. A hydrogen fueling station, which may be a little bit different and much more new to you guys since there's only 44 in the state, actually looks a lot like a gas station. A lot of them are co-located at existing gasoline stations and provide basically a very, very similar experience as, a Shell or an Arco, anything like that. Take it, you plug in, and the only real difference is that in a hydrogen fueling station, the fuel is stored above ground. And so you'll see sort of large, almost sort of industrial looking blocks next to these stations. So with that, I want to thank you all for being here as we get started, because the simple fact of the matter is we as a state can't hit our goals without you guys, and we can't try to, make the world a little bit cleaner without your efforts. So thank you for being here. Kylan, we'll now talk about electric vehicle permitting, get really into the nuts and bolts of what AB 1236 is supposed to do and how you guys can help follow along. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kylan Rathjen. I'm at the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development in our Zero Emission Vehicle Market Development Unit. So we're working throughout California to speed up the development of zero emission vehicle infrastructure and help transition the state of California to a clean economy powered by renewable energy. So we're really excited to have you all here today to talk about these important issues and how we can work together as a state to meet these goals. Where we bring this up time and time again is that the state sets very ambitious goals, but none of that can be completed without local and regional partners. So we really love all the support we have here in the room today and really want to be a useful resource providing best practices and information so that we can all make this transition together and have a lot of economic development and great communication in the process. So why is permit streamlining important? Why are we all here today? So as a baseline, it's important to understand that this new economy will create a tremendous amount of jobs that will put Californians to work with good pay, good benefits. We will have cleaner air in the process of developing this infrastructure so that more folks would be comfortable and willing to drive zero emission vehicles. And at the city level, it provides more availability of staff time to work on other projects. There's many mandates that the state of California has, but permit streamlining is really a win-win because it saves you time on the staff level to work on other initiatives. So across the board, this is a very positive initiative. So by working together, we can really get those win-wins that'll bring the state, jobs and better air. It's also important to understand that charging stations to install them costs 3 to 5 times more than the charger itself. This is a much higher ratio compared to other countries, and it's something we need to work together to bring down the costs. And a Rocky Mountain Institute study has indicated that the greatest possibility for cost reduction with installing a charging station are soft costs, specifically permitting. So if we can figure out how to streamline the permitting process, we can greatly increase the rate that we're deploying these stations. Looking at one of the charging station companies, Electrify America, from their data last month, it's indicated that compared to the national average, it's 30% longer to the permitting timelines to install a charging station in California compared to another state. Stations need to be designed 30% more frequently, and they cost 22% more to build. So in spite of California's very ambitious goals to install charging stations and have rapid deployment of EVs and ZEVs, it's very difficult at the local level to get these permitted. And finally, the California Electrification Coalition indicated that based off California's goals, we need to install charging stations at 15 to 45 sites every working day over the next decade to meet our goals. So clearly, to increase the rate of adoption, we need to make the permitting process easier and more streamlined. So to drive this point home and to provide support for local governments throughout California, our office has developed an electric vehicle charging station permitting guidebook. It's a great document that's fun to look at and to read, that provides best practices from the jurisdictions all over California about what to do, how to speed up your permitting process, and just best practices. And it goes over the full gambit of information you would need to know. We start by talking about planning and site selection. We also speak about permitting, really the heart and soul of the guidebook. And we also go over AB 1236, which is the state of California streamlining law that my colleague Patrick brought up. We also have a map that we've developed to evaluate the cities and counties across California, whether they've met the guidelines of AB 1236. Third, we also speak about accessibility. We're going to have a whole session on this later today, but we talk about that in the guidebook. Fourth, we'll be talking about interconnection of the grid and working with utilities. And fifth, we talk about construction, commissioning, and operations. To start with planning and site selection. So the state of California has done a tremendous amount to prepare our buildings to be ready for electric vehicles, but cities can go above and beyond and adopt the so-called REACH codes. So we've developed a list of information on REACH codes, the cities that have gone and counties that have gone above and beyond in our guidebook to provide resources to local governments. We also provide information on the parking and charging clarifications. So one big issue that cities have faced is that a charging station doesn't count as a parking spot, and meeting those parking quotas at different cities. AB 1236 clearly affirms that a parking spot counts as a charging spot and vice versa. And that's been only reaffirmed, second bite of the apple, by AB 1100. So there's two laws now showing that it's very clear that a charging spot must count as a parking spot. And we've also developed a great list here, which is in our guidebook, which shows you could get better bang for your buck for installing a charging station. So Sacramento County, for example, you get 2 parking spots if you install a charging station. So that's a great practice that we've encouraged cities and counties across California to adopt. We also talk about climate action plans and how any EV readiness efforts and zero emission vehicle infrastructure planning should be incorporated into climate action plans. So permitting, we go into a lot of detail to this in our guidebook and talk about the process about AB 1236, which Patrick again brought up, was passed in 2015. It said every city and county in California needed to streamline their permitting practices based off this graph we've developed right here. Essentially, you need to pass an ordinance, which says you'd streamline your permitting practices. You need to have an online checklist on your website and have an online signature component where cities can apply online for a permit for a charging station. Permit submittal would be funneled through the building department, and there would be a focus specifically on health and safety, not on other aesthetic factors. All deficiencies and problems with that permit should be bundled together in one deficiency notice. You have resubmittal, and then there's a quick review process, and the building official would then give the permit once all the issues are addressed. So this is the way the structure should work, and it has worked in many jurisdictions throughout California, but as the data shows, many problems exist throughout the state. So we're trying to reinforce this point and provide best practices in our guidebook. Second, we also talk about timelines. While timelines are not codified in the law, it's a best practice we've seen where if a city or county says, you know, you'll get your permit in a certain timeline, it's a way to help provide certainty for the charging companies and speed up the process. So we see here from application submittal to complete response, optimally it would be the same day, but 5 days is a best practice. From complete package to approval to build, optimally it'd be the same day again, but within a best practice it would be 15 days. And then from construction notice to inspection, same day again would be great, but a 5-day best practice is seen as optimal. So again, this is not codified in the law, but again, great practice for cities and counties to adopt. So speaking about accessibility, so the ADA, the American Disabilities Act, applies all throughout the United States, but the federal government has not released particular rules regarding accessibility with charging stations. California, being a leader in so many ways, has set the laws about and regulations with charging stations with accessibility. So we've indicated in our guidebook the best way for a city or county to address this issue is to develop a legally defensive code path. So we have a contact in the guidebook. It's important to get in touch with the Division of State Architect. They can walk you through the process and develop that legally defensible code path so that you don't get sued, which is the big concern local jurisdictions have. We also have graphs here that describe how many accessible spots you need depending on how many charging stations you have. We also speak about connection to the grid. Again, we're going to have a whole session on interconnection later in the day today, but we talk about the importance of working with utilities, communicating as early as possible to make sure your project gets installed in an effective amount of time, and the importance of working with interconnection teams and specifically designated at the local level. Finally, we talk about construction, commissioning, and operations. We talk about the weights and certification measurement, which will come online within the next few years, which say that you need to have the amount of energy dispensed from a charging station. You pay for that versus the amount of time. So this is a law that or regulation which is going into effect in the future that will not allow charging stations to charge per time for amount of energy dispensed. We also talk about signage and how Caltrans will provide signs free of charge if you're having your station be accessible all throughout the day, so 24-hour access. So all that information is available in the guidebook. So the living version of what we've developed is our permit streamlining map, which evaluates every city and county in California, whether or not they've complied with AB 1236. So red means you have not gone ahead with streamlining, yellow, you've complied with part of the law, green means you have streamlined. So you can see from the state here, we still have a lot of work to do. You can click on any city or county in California and look at all the criteria we've discussed, your ordinance and your checklist, so you can see where every city and county is at. In terms of the grading of every city and county, what we're looking for is, number one, a streamlining ordinance. So this is the bread and butter of AB 1236. It says that a city or county will streamline their permitting, and that's codified by the city council or board of supervisors. Second, you need a checklist, which is available for commercial and residential projects, which covers level 2 and DC fast charge. Again, available on your website, so an applicant can know what they need to apply for a permit. Third, that there's an administrative approval of a charging station, and that it goes through the building department and is limited to health and safety, which is the fourth point. So again, it's administratively approved. It's not an art, it's a science. You're just making sure it meets all the requirements, and you would give a permit shortly after that point. Fifth, that electronic signatures are accepted so that charging station companies can do this remotely to speed up the process. Sixth, that a charging station is not subject to an association approval. What we're thinking of is a condo board here, some smaller private entity that would stop a project. Seventh, which is a very large issue that charging stations face, that there's one complete deficiency notice. So you don't have problems with the planning department, the building department from all the different sides of the city. All the problems are bundled together and given to the charging station company at once so the process can be sped up. And eighth, we have a bonus criteria, which is creating that timeline. So if you get that 8th bonus point and all 7 points, you'll be designated a permit streamlining all-star, and you'll get a special certification on our map. So you definitely want to get all 8 points here. So we've graded 99% of the state now, and this is the data that we found. So 83% of jurisdictions have streamlined, and the rest of California, the other 85%, has not gone ahead and adopted an ordinance, gotten a checklist, hasn't gone through that extra step. So even though this law has been on the books since 2015, the majority of the state have not done what they've needed to do. And we've spoken to cities, in many cases, charging companies will be the ones that don't submit great applications, so there's problems on their end. But we're looking at ordinances and checklists here, and the vast majority of California has not gone ahead and done that. So we see that 15.5% of California has gone ahead based off our analysis. How does that compare to SCAG? It's a very similar picture. You have a lot more yellow here, but 12% of jurisdictions have streamlined in California, in SCAG territory. So there's a lot of work to be done, but a lot of great promise. And we've had great working relationships with cities throughout California, cities and counties, and we believe we can all get to green as a state together because people want to make this happen. A lot of folks don't know that they had to do this. So together we can work together to get to green. So what are some common problems that charging companies have. So one is aesthetic review. So, you don't have enough bushes, the charging station's not the right color. All these issues pop up, which significantly hamper the installing a station and increasing costs. There's zoning concerns, parking issues, and in many cases, cities won't have electronic signature, forcing charging companies to spend money to, come out to a city hall for a permit. So all these issues are not in compliance with AB 1236. So we really want to drive that point home that these changes need to be made so that the process can be streamlined. Also, ADA interpretations are a large issue. Every city can interpret the ADA in different ways. So we, again, want you to get in touch with the Division of State Architect to develop this streamlined, legally defensible code path to speed up the process, to make sure that cities and counties aren't sued, but that those charging stations are being put in quickly. And we've seen the largest issue about AB 1236 is that cities and counties didn't know they needed to pass it. They didn't know that this was an issue. There wasn't the outreach needed. So that's why we're here today. We're having this workshop so that everyone in California knows what they need to do to get to green. So this is an example of what charging stations would have to deal with. You have building department reviews, planning department reviews, ADA compliance coming from a part of the city, third, fourth round comments. All this is coming together, delaying the project. So what would be optimal and based off AB 1236 is all of these problems are bundled through the building department review and everything is streamlined so that the charging station company can address all the problems without new ones popping up throughout the process. So how to become green on our map, which is, I know why a lot of folks from cities and counties are here today. So step number one is you need to pass an ordinance. Many cities and counties have done this already, but you need to behind the counter also do what the ordinance says, but all of this needs to come together within an ordinance. Second, you need to have that online checklist covering commercial, residential, multifamily properties so that any project, there's a checklist available to streamline the process. We have many examples available on the GoBiz website, and the California building officials have created examples that you can use. Also, our map, any of these green cities have examples that you can just click on to see what they've done. And all of this comes together behind the counter as well. You can't just meet AB 1236 on paper. You need to have a streamlined process behind the counter. The planning department should be removed as much as possible, and the building department should really lead these reviews. So thank you so much for listening to my presentation here today. My name is Kylan Rathjen, and Tyson Eckerly is the leader of our unit here at GoBiz. We're happy to help you get to green, provide any questions you have. There's our emails and phone numbers. The lines are open. We're here to help you get to green. And we also have a newsletter called The Plug and the Nozzle, which has a lot of great information on permitting best practices with EV infrastructure. And if you want to know what the governor's office is doing in regards to zero emission vehicles, it's a great resource. So thank you so much. Happy to help. And do we have time for questions? Oh, yeah. So any questions anyone has, happy to go ahead.
Hey, you mentioned
Oh, you, yeah.
on one of the beginning slides, the redesign stat for 30% have to be redesigned. Can you provide a bit more detail about what redesign means in that context?
Sure. So that's just based off Electrify America data. So they're going to come out later today and give a presentation. So I'm sure that they could speak to that.
Okay.
But yeah, it's just, various delays, and I'm in different situations. So I'm sure they can speak to that later. Yeah, any other questions? Okay, go ahead.
So I was curious, most of this appears to be situations where the facilities, where the property's already been developed and the chargers are being added. Are there things that cities could be aware of in terms of design expectations for these stations that could be built into the entitlement review? Could we pre-design ahead of time to avoid what are being described as deficiencies or issues during plan check?
We, again, in our planning section of our guidebook, we talk about reach codes that cities can adopt to have new construction be more ready for zero emission vehicles. You can have parking requirements. So that's available. We have resources in our guidebook that you could look to. And Tyson, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
Sure. Oh, sorry, hold on. There we go. So I'm Tyson Eckerly with GoBiz, but I think really what we're trying to do is take the entitlement out of the picture, right? It's a building review. I think if I'm getting at the heart of the question, right? So it's if you can bring power to the site and this charging stations will work and you can meet ADA and there's no health or safety concerns, essentially that's what we're after, right? Does that answer your question?
I think so. I understand that part. I was just starting with Roger. Nothing's happened yet. They're designing it. We're anticipating the need for chargers in the future.
Oh, sure.
At that stage, are there things that we could be doing to pre-design so that
Yes.
we avoid impacts to
Absolutely.
parking, aesthetics, and some of the other things that might be a concern later?
So I think one of the big things, and there's some charging companies in the room too, but is pre-designing for ADA compliance, and so especially for the van accessible spots, just making sure there's enough space. The other part is pre-laying conduit to those locations that you believe will have charging either immediately or in the future. That saves a tremendous amount of effort and money going forward. Yeah, so that gets your question. Yeah, okay. And Rick, did it?
So green building code requires a percentage of those parking spaces for new construction or for any rehabilitation greater than $200,000. And so if you go to green building code, you'll see a minimum level. As far as future, if you look at what's coming is the electrification of all transportation. And so if you think about that, if you've got a fulfillment center, by 2040, probably by 2030, everything they purchase is going to be electrified. How are they going to charge that? So with that kind of thought in mind, you want to at least you want to require that there are sufficient panels for the chargers. And then as mentioned earlier, you want to at least have the raceways run so that it's easier to fish through the conduit for the EVSE afterwards.
Same thing. Hi, it's Brian with the Energy Commission. So I had a comment that hopefully you guys could expand on because I'm missing the exact comment, but I saw a proposed bill analysis come through for a new assembly bill that's around the permitting timeline now that recently just got introduced, and it's more around your proposed and best practices of like 5 days for reviews. And so that's something I encourage everyone to kind of provide support for to your legislature and everyone else, and hopefully that gets approved in the future. I forget the exact number though, but not sure if you guys saw anything about that.
Yeah, so there is a bill in the legislature. I think it's AB 2168. Like, we in the governor's office haven't taken a position on it, because there's a lot to work through because, local side and build and charging station side as well. But that's also something that's kind of helping, I think, put some pressure on this. And so from the GoBiz perspective and the state perspective, we're moving forward assuming that legislation isn't passed because nothing's a done deal until it is. So our objective really is to turn the state green, right? And so I think the motivating factor behind that legislation is really to address the issues that we've seen here with the lack of streamlining generally across the state. And so we're working to make sure we fix that one way or the other. But it's something definitely to pay attention to and make sure you're aware of. Thanks, Brian.
Great. Go ahead.
How do we obtain the guidebook you're talking about? Seems like a great resource.
Sure. So feel free to go to our GoBiz website. We have it available. Also, it's the most comprehensive electric vehicle charging station permanent guidebook that exists. So you can just Google it and it'll appear. And I'm also happy to send you a copy of it if you'd like to get your contact information afterwards.
One of the easiest websites is like business.ca.gov/ZEV readiness. And that'll take you to, that actually just goes to the plugin side of the readiness thing, but kind of this whole effort has links to the guidebook, has best practices and the map.
Yeah, and we'll be sending out all these PowerPoints afterwards, and we have links embedded within this presentation as well. So we'll make sure we get it to you. Great. So if there's not any online questions, then Happy to jump into our next speaker. Brian Fauble from the Energy Commission will be speaking about electric vehicle charging station incentives in the Cal EVIP program. So come on over, Brian. Thanks.
Good morning, everybody. So Brian Fauble with the California Energy Commission. I will be speaking about the California Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Project, Cal EVIP. Before I get into that, another resource to find the permitting guidebook is calevip.org. Just go to resources. The bottom line item of resources is the permitting guidebook link. Goes to page, takes you to their website for the map and downloading all their documents as well. So today I'm going to give a little bit of background about Cal EVIP, some of our projects coming soon, as well as the importance of permitting and how that ties into Cal EVIP, and talk about some additional funding opportunities. Does this screen move as I do that screen as well? Is it just the presentations? I can do it this way.
Yeah, you can advance.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So Cal EVIP background. We decided to try to, at the Energy Commission, historically we fund grants. That process is very time consuming. Write a solicit or think of a solicitation concept, workshop it, write it, collect applications, score them, write an amendment or an agreement, 5 years to implement. Way too much time to meet our 2025 goals. So we needed something to speed up that whole mechanism for installations, reporting on that, and funding the whole process. And Cal EVIP is designed to implement targeted incentive projects throughout California that address each region's specific future needs. And so let's first talk about what Cal EVIP and an incentive project, two different things there. Cal EVIP is really the website and the home to all of these separate projects that we'll launch geographically. The calevip.org will have multiple resources. It'll have the pages to go to each project. It's how you apply online for the application and the rebates. Everything is managed online and streamlined. An incentive project, again, is tied to a specific region. It can be a county, it can be a group of counties, and usually is trying to address that region's future need for 2025 EV drivers. And today we have active projects totaling $73.5 million. That's $71 million from the Energy Commission and $2.5 million from partners. Our projects to date, we have 6 of them shown here, covering about, let me do the math, 5, 6, 7, 10, about 16 counties or so. And again, for that $73.5 million. And when we first started this, our first project was level 2 only. Our second project was in Southern California for fast chargers only. And now with our fourth or third and moving forward, all of our projects are covering both level 2 and fast chargers, meaning an applicant can decide to fill out an application just to install level 2. They can do just fast chargers, or they can do both. So I'm going to talk quickly about our projects coming out this year. We have 3 of them, and they're the Sonoma Coast project, Peninsula Silicon Valley project, San Diego County project, and we'll get into a little bit more of each of those later. But what I wanted to point out here is these 3 projects total $54 million in Energy Commission funds and have partners as well in every project totaling about $33 million additional funds over 2 to 4 years. So this is doubling the size of Cal EVIP in 1 year. This is a slide showing all of the partners that we have. Again, every project launching in 2020 has direct partners that are contributing funds. And even designing 2021 already, we have multiple partners that want to be a part of Cal EVIP. So the Sonoma Coast incentive projects covering Sonoma and Mendocino County. This shows how much funding is really proposed for both technologies. And again, when this project information goes up, you'll see how much will really be available at launch. The Energy Commission's funds are always available on day one of launch, and the partners' funds will vary depending on the fiscal year for their contributions. Our other project, Peninsula Silicon Valley, will be pretty much our largest to date for San Mateo and Santa Clara counties. The Energy Commission will be providing, again, $33 million and has 5 partners covering about $26 million additional funds over 2 to 4 years. Our San Diego County project will be just San Diego County, have $15.8 million available for fast chargers, and an additional 15.58 for level 2 funds. And here we're partnering with SANDAG and the APCD. So some quick overview of who's eligible and some of the requirements for Cali VIP. The takeaway is anybody can apply for Cali VIP as long as you have a business license in California. It can be the business owner, it can be a manufacturer, a network provider, not-for-profits, contractors, etc. Anyone can apply as long as you get permission from the person that you're going to build on their property. Site locations, we have different eligibility for both level 2 and fast chargers. Level 2, we pretty much say any site is eligible, excluding single family residents. Our chargers for level 2 can be private, it can be public, it can be multi-unit dwellings. The main takeaway is that all of our chargers have to be shared use, meaning it can't be dedicated for a single driver. So no CEOs, no private residents. Everybody needs to be able to use this. We also have restrictions that comply with all the laws, being the permitting, being the ADA, etc., and any other local laws as well. For our fast chargers, we do have a little more restriction that sites need to be one of these site types. These were chosen pretty much to analyze where a driver is going on their daily travel routes anyways. We don't want these to be out of the way. It's typically like a gas station, you don't want it out in the boondocks. You want it where you're going to be going and using. It's also something where you're going to want to kill maybe 20 or 30 minutes. You don't want it to be in a dark alley. You want it to be safe, well lit, and be able to use. Fast chargers also have to be available 24/7, 365. So I already basically went over this for the level 2s, that anybody can apply, or any site is eligible in shared use. I just backwards, so we'll skip that one. Eligible costs. So this is what I'm learning is a lot of people don't understand really that Cali VIP rebate almost covers anything needed to install the charger. It's not just the rebate for a charger. It's for the installation of this charger. We have other requirements as well that is also would be eligible. A networking agreement for X number of years. Warranties are going to be eligible. The labor, if you need to upgrade the utility connection, the transformer panels, etc. We have anything's pretty much eligible. We do have things that are not eligible, obviously, but minimal items. Permitting fees, we can't pay for those. Solar panels and any other costs paid by an additional funding program or project. So what does that mean? We allow stacking of rebates as well. So if our rebate's not going to cover your full costs and there's another rebate program in the area, let's partner together and make sure that you can get most of your costs covered as possible without profiting. So our timelines with Cali VIP, again, this is to speed up the whole process. So we put timelines that you need to have your charger activated once your application's been reserved. Fast charger combos, 15 months, level 2s are 9 months. So what does that mean? Don't apply if you're not ready. If you're a city or county and you need to do an RFP, you already need to have that RFP pretty much ready to go. We know timelines for those, especially in the state, are very lengthy. So make sure you're going to have your process ready to go. You can have your site host agreement already signed. We don't want to be negotiating that back and forth and eating up our clock. So again, with that timeline, the application, when you get reserved, your clock starts ticking. It's meaning that charger needs to be operational and you need to be done with everything, reporting everything online, submitting your documents. The good thing is it's not a paper trail. Everything's online. As soon as you have a permit, upload it to your profile. As soon as you have an invoice for chargers, upload it to your profile. It doesn't need to be a last minute thing. You can upload it as it goes and not wait till the last moment. So why am I here talking about Cali VIP? I want to get funding out there, but also I need to talk about some of the barriers that we're seeing in just general EV charging installations. Most of them were covered previously, but I'm just going to hammer them home. Site host negotiations, what we're seeing in a lot of our grants, 9 months or so. So it's advanced work needing to go talk to these sites before you really start applying. Permitting, that's exactly why we're here today. Permitting is, from our agreements, I've seen 5 days, I've seen 285 days. So let's get to the 5. Utility interconnection and energization. Why that's important, I want to just hammer home that everyone should be talking to the utilities and not waiting till the last second. Understand their process, be in contact with them, and don't have any, hidden news. You should be up to date with them, stay in regular contact. They've been great at helping us with our DC fast charge corridors, and they're more than willing to help you guys out as well. So permitting, just repeating again what's already been happening. We have goals. We have an Assembly Bill 1236 that went into effect 3 years ago. And we have in Cali VIP expedited timelines to get these installations done. But also, why is permitting going to be important in Cali VIP? Pretty much Cali VIP is going to be a carrot for future projects. If you want a project in your region, there's going to be multiple factors on how we select Cali VIP projects in the moving forward. EVI Pro, if anyone's not aware of that, that's a modeling tool developed in partnership with the Energy Commission and NREL. And it pretty much does analysis looking at each county on their future charging needs out to 2025. And so if you go to this tool, you'll click on LA County, it'll say, all right, LA County needs a range, a high and a low, because again, we are experts, but we're not fortune tellers. And so it'll say, well, you may need this number of chargers on the minimum, or you may need this much on the high end. But it'll say, all right, you need this many MUDs, this many workplaces, publics, and fast chargers. And so we use EVI Pro analysis to create a gap analysis of what's existing, what's the need, minus existing, minus planned. And now we know how to address or how to fund certain regions. The second item is we're seeing partnerships come to us now. We were seeking partnerships originally, and now we're getting a lot of partners that want to be in Cali VIP. So the strength of a partnership will also help select projects. But the third one, as a 3-tier scale, weighing all of this will be, is your jurisdiction county overall streamlined? And so utilizing GoBiz's permitting map, when we get down to the final decision points, we're gonna really look at all 3 of these, but how much green you have, not just money, but permitting guidebook, jurisdictions, that'll be a factor in final decisions. So we just saw this map, but I wanted to share the great work and appreciate GoBiz's team on doing this. We had our first permitting workshop in October or November, and that's when I think this really started off. And in the short time, we've addressed a lot of this map and moving a lot to green and yellow, and look forward to more of it. So for additional Cali VIP information, there's a couple of links you can go to, calivip.org, pretty simple, lots of resources there. There's the Energy Commission's docket page where you can hear about workshops, presentations, etc. And the Center for Sustainable Energy also implements and runs Cali VIP for us, and so they can answer a lot of the questions. But I also wanted to talk about, again, some additional funding, not just Cali VIP. So one of our resources is additional funding programs on Cali VIP. When you go to find a project under Cali VIP, at the bottom of our 6 current projects, there's a list of additional incentive funding. And so I highlighted a couple here that you might see. There's going to be always funding from POUs, air districts, and the IOUs as well. So I listed LADWP, SMUD, City of Burbank as a few, Bay Area, AQMD, San Joaquin Valley. Our page will get updated. We've been hammered with a lot of special requests for new features, and so we will try to regularly update this list with more. But Center for Sustainable Energy is always open to taking your calls and emails, and if you need more information, if you don't see something in your specific geographic region, give them a call and they'll help you find some money. So that's all I had. That's my pretty picture and all my contact information. And thank you very much.
That's great. We do have a few questions from online. We have one from Jorge. He asks, will special districts be eligible for a Cal EVIP program?
So our projects again launch to usually a whole county. So special districts, yes, they'll be grouped in with part of the county, but it's, are you going to be in that county? So we're designing projects right now for 2021. Our 2020s are identified. 2021, if you're really interested, contact CSE right now, as we'll probably be announcing those in August already.
Sandra Peterson with Envision Solar. For solutions that want a component that is renewable, that has solar, what's the logic behind not having the solar panels included?
Right now, it's a cost factor, cost benefit. What we've seen in some of our corridor agreements, the amount of funding for the panels at this time just aren't what we're having as eligible. We are exploring changes. The difficult part as well, not for your guys' company, but with solar panels for our funding, they need to be dedicated solely to the charger and not benefiting the building or anything else. And so there would be a verification process to make sure that as well.
My name is Lane Garcia. I'm with the South Coast Air Quality Management District. On the last slide, I just want to note that SCAQMD is also a source of funding. Cities receive AB 2766 funds regularly for motor vehicle registrations, and those funds can be used for the projects that we're looking at today. And I also had a question about the Volkswagen settlement funds. I noticed that's not listed here. Those are being utilized through the Bay Area AQMD as well for electric vehicle charging station projects. So I wanted to see if you were aware of that or if you know how that can be used for this project.
Sure. So yes, we are aware of that. The Energy Commission at this time has not been allocated any Volkswagen funds, but everything we are listing pretty much on here is what a business owner can really apply for, less of an organization.
I think maybe just to clarify too, a lot of the VW settlement funds, there's Appendix C, which is Electrify America implements, they'll be talking later. And then there's the Appendix D funds, which has a limited amount for light duty infrastructure. It's mostly heavy duty.
Hi, question from the webinar. Who gets to keep LCFS with Cal EVIP?
Sure. So in all of our projects besides the Sacramento County project, it's up to the owner of the equipment to decide ownership of the LCFS credits. In the Sacramento County project, we partnered with Sacramento Municipality District or Department, SMUD. With that partnership, they are providing additional funds, but as well, we have a requirement that the Cali VIP applicant for level 2 chargers only must assign or waive their right to the credit to SMUD, who will then generate the credits, sell them, and then invest all of those generated credits back into the Sacramento County incentive project for additional rebates. But every other project, do as you wish.
And we have one last question from the webinar. Please elaborate on shared use of EVSEs under EVIP. Will EVSE use for exclusive use of fleet vehicles at the fleet's garage qualify as shared use?
Sure. So shared use, again, is one vehicle or driver cannot be solely dedicated to a charger. Fleets are eligible, let me reframe that. Light duty fleet is eligible, again, because all of our funding is for light duty. So for fleets, as long as the primary purpose is for light duty and this charger will benefit more than one vehicle, then that is considered shared use. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. So I think Cal VIP is a really great example of the state streamlining our processes. I think, as Brian mentioned, the grant process takes a long time, but this rebates, we've really seen a speed and acceleration in the market. So that's really something we're trying to model. So we're asking you to streamline, but we're also trying to streamline ourselves. Okay.